On the road, just like on the court, you need speed and precision. And the first ever Kia K4 delivers both, with an available 190 horsepower turbocharged engine and sleek futuristic design. The Kia K4 stands out with Star Map LED headlights and available surround view monitor, offering a courtside view of all the action. Plus, Sirius XM comes standard, bringing you closer to what you love. Learn more at kia.com/K4. Surround view monitor may not detect all objects around the vehicle.
Kroger Delivery makes it easy to do your holiday shopping in a jingle. There might be a lot on your to-do list, but thanks to Kroger Delivery, you can get everything you need delivered straight to your door at the same great prices you'd find in store. Our refrigerated trucks always ensure that your groceries arrive fresh. And right now, you can save $20 on your first order of $75 or more and get free delivery with a Boost membership. Restrictions apply. See site for details. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Holiday magic is in the air, and DSW's got all the shoes to make your season extra merry. Believe, you've got parties to attend and lists to check twice, so DSW is taking care of the details, like gifts to make their eyes all aglow, styles that bring joy to your world, brands everyone wants, like UGG, Nike, Birkenstock, and more, and deals to make your budget bright. Find the perfect shoes for you and yours at a DSW store near you or dsw.com.
Welcome to Putback with Ian Begley. Today I am joined by two great guests. We have John Krawczynski, a senior NBA writer who covers the Timberwolves specifically for The Athletic, and we have Lee Escobedo. Lee, longtime Knick fan, strong opinions on Knick Twitter. You can find him on the KOT show as well, Knick of Time. And before we get started, guys, remember, you can leave your questions in the replies. We'll get to some of those later in the show. And you can also catch us in podcast form wherever you download your podcasts. But let's get started, guys, with the baseline. Knicks Timberwolves tomorrow night, first regular season game since the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. Should be a fun night for John in Minnesota. And Towns coming back home, a place where he spent 10 years, grew up in the league. I think he's looking forward to going back there and seeing friends. He said that. I don't know if he knows what to expect, but I think he's looking forward to seeing some old faces, probably John included. So I want to start with Karl. John, and I'm wondering if I don't know how much you've seen of the Knicks, but you mentioned on Twitter a couple observations on Cat. What are your thoughts on what he's done so far in New York?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ian. I mean, I think, watching him, and I have paid close attention to the Knicks since this trade, trying to, kind of keep a track of everything that Cat has been doing and how he's been reacclimating and to a new place. And I think that I've found it interesting that you get people talking about, wow, he does this and he does that, and this is crazy. Look at how great his offensive skills are and how varied his talents are. And I just want to scream from the mountaintop. He's been doing this for 9 years in Minnesota. Like, this is the player that he has always been in terms of efficiency, in terms of when he plays center, really taking advantage of bigs and having his way with them from an offensive standpoint. I do think if there is one thing I noticed that is a little bit different, I do think he's playing with a little more physicality and a little more force with the Knicks. He just seems to have a 10-year pro's idea of what he wants to do. And I think moving from power forward, which is what he played the last 2 years in Minnesota, back to center in New York is a little more comfortable for him. He knows what he has to do there and how he has to get to his spots. And so you're seeing the rebounding come back at a super high level. You're seeing him go to the basket with real authority and just like really embracing the newness of it and his spot in a really great Knicks offense right now.
Yeah, I think he's met or exceeded anyone's expectations coming into this year so far. Lee, for you, what has surprised you when you watch Karl over this first portion of the season?
Man, Ian, thanks for having me on. Appreciate you. When the trade happened, I tweeted out immediately, Dynasty, because I typically get ahead of myself. But as someone who watches Minnesota, I've always been impressed by Cat's 5-level scoring never really liked the criticism that he received as being soft or a passive player. And what surprised me the most in New York is the MVP candidacy. I think he's really put together not just being a dominant offensive player and getting his own shot, but making the pass that leads to the pass that hits a shot. That's been, I think, the playmaking and the passing that's been the most a revelation for this Knicks team, because he fits in really seamless. He's not a system player. He's very much plug and play, and he's really developed an elite chemistry with Jalen Brunson to pick and roll.
Yeah, I'm going to go off the court. Maybe this isn't a surprise to John, just like Karl's offensive game is not a surprise to John, but the idea that he's come in here and he has fully stated that this is Jalen Brunson's team. He calls him Cap for captain all the time. He said several times, look, I just need to kind of get out of the way and let Jalen do what he does. And he's really embraced that sort of hierarchy. And I don't think Jalen Brunson cares at all whether people say this is his team or not. But I think it just creates an easier dynamic day in, day out around an NBA team when a player is accepting of that role, especially a player of Towns' stature. John, I'm curious, when Anthony Edwards, when it was clear that Anthony Edwards was kind of taking over as the number one option, how did Karl adjust to that? Was it an easy adjustment? And how much of that do you think helped him coming into New York?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really underrated part of Karl's personality and his approach to the game is his willingness to sacrifice for teammates. He was the man here in Minnesota for a very long time, the number one overall pick. And then Anthony Edwards comes in as another number one overall pick, and he's dynamic and he's really charming and he's ultra skilled. And you can see you could see the public narrative start to swirl, and whose team is it? Is it a Cat's team? Is it Ant's team? And, in this league, a drama-filled league, people try to look for, conflict, and they tried to create it with Cat and Ant, and Cat just never would have that. He was ultra supportive of Anthony Edwards. He loved to share the spotlight with him. He had no problem stepping into the background when needed to let Ant shine. Anthony Edwards was also very good about sharing that spotlight with Karl-Anthony Towns. So they got along great. Cat was very deferential to him and very accommodating to him. And the other player that Karl-Anthony Towns was incredibly accommodating to was Rudy Gobert. The season before Gobert arrived, Karl-Anthony Towns was an all-NBA third-team center. And when they bring in Rudy Gobert, you're asking an all-NBA player to move positions, the face of the franchise, to move positions. And he did that for Rudy Gobert and to accommodate Rudy. And he was the Timberwolves player who was probably most invested in throwing Rudy the ball, getting him involved in offense, keeping him included. And so when he went to New York, I wasn't surprised at all that this was the approach that he had with Jalen Brunson, especially now that there isn't the long-term history of Karl with the Knicks franchise just as a franchise player. He's the new kid on the block. He's coming into a situation where Jalen Brunson is the established leader. And I always assumed that he was going to come in and be very welcoming, but also very deferential to Jalen's status. Karl wants to do the right thing from a teammate perspective that way. And, we've seen all across the league power struggles, players with selfishness or wanting more for their role and jealousy and pettiness and things like that. That's just never been Karl-Anthony Towns at all.
It's definitely been interesting to watch. And John, your perspective there is invaluable. So thank you for that. And Lee, I'm curious for you, it's so early, right? I think ultimately this trade will be judged in what happens in June, playoff appearances, championships, deep playoff runs, things like that. But where are you in terms of judging this deal at the moment as the Knicks get set to play the Timberwolves?
It's a home run, I think, just based on fit, as I mentioned earlier. What I like the most about Cat is he seems to be playing not just with a chip on his shoulder, but really for his mother. And he's talked about that repeatedly in post-game comments about how his mom was a Knick fan and he grew up a Knick fan. And I think that's the passion that's fueling this incredible MVP level play. But I also think there's a huge difference between Randle and Karl-Anthony Towns. It's not just on the basketball side. It's also a level of self-awareness. Karl-Anthony Towns really operates on and off the court, very self-aware. He's not afraid to roast himself. He's not afraid to break the fourth wall with the Knicks fans and engage with them. And he doesn't try to act like he's fake tough or has fit a certain role. He's also shown that he's one of the most skilled offensive players in the league today and an all-around great teammate. If you listen to any of the commentary from his teammates in Minnesota today, from Gobert to Mike Conley, they all praise his character, not just his character, but his ability to really fit in and cultivate a sense of team unity. And I think he's doing that in New York as well. And the team needed it because Julius Randle was a big personality on the team. This team was originally built around his persona. And so Karl-Anthony Towns has really fit in seamlessly and helped build a bridge between everyone with his new role.
Lee, you mentioned Julius. John, I'm curious, your impressions early on of Julius so far in Minnesota, and as a follow-up, just what do you think his future is there? He's a looming free agent.
Yeah, he's come in and from a fit standpoint, chemistry standpoint, certainly fit in well in the locker room. The guys really like being around him. He really has enjoyed the welcoming that he's gotten in Minnesota. He's talked about kind of the environment, the community, and the way people have embraced him. On the court, it has been clunky at times. It's been a work in progress for sure. I mean, he is a ball-dominant type of a player. Anthony Edwards is a ball-dominant type of a player. And I think that he's still trying to find that rhythm with Ant in the two-man game. Also working with Rudy Gobert. Gobert is a very unique guy and teammate to kind of learn both offensively and defensively how to play with him and around him. And there have been really good moments. He's hit a buzzer beater game-winning shot for the Wolves. He's put up very consistent numbers, but then you can also see that there are times where he is not yet fully comfortable with just his responsibilities on the court, what they need from him, when it's time for him to really be aggressive and assertive, and when it's time for him to get others involved. I think that's all part of the acclimation process that's just taken a little bit of time here. And a lot of the Wolves officials and people expected, kind of a longer, steeper learning curve for Julius Randle to fit in here.
I honestly think you could say the same thing for the Knicks. I mean, I know they want to win every game and the standings are important, but I do think that by and large, this regular season, get through it healthy and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And so, Lee, I'm curious from your perspective, have you hit the panic button at all over the course of this first part of the season? Anything worry you to the degree that you're concerned that the Knicks won't make it to where you would like to see them go?
I'll touch on Randle first. I'm a big reader, so I like to watch the NBA in kind of Shakespearean terms. And I've always seen Julius Randle as a Macbeth of Minnesota. He's someone who I think can be looked at as a hero and a villain in some ways. The stats have went down a little bit in terms of rebounding and assists, but his efficiency has actually been pretty solid playing his role next to Anthony Edwards and Gobert. But Julius Randle, he's a very controversial player. It's not so much the ability to play offense. It's more the ball watching on defense. The lackadaisical defense is what really irritated a lot of Knicks fans, including myself. And I was an ardent supporter of him, both online and on the podcast. But the defense was always an issue. That's one thing about Karl-Anthony Towns that I've been surprised about is the effort on defense. He doesn't have the best timing or instincts in terms of protecting the rim, a key component of Tom Thibodeau's defensive schemes, but he's trying. And that's the only thing I've been really worried about when Karl-Anthony Towns is fit here in New York, is the rim protection and the defense in the paint. I think that's going to come with time. Getting Precious Achiuwa is going to be huge in being able to rotate and switch 2 through 5. And then to return to Mitchell Robinson will help the rim protection even more. I like those combinations of OG, Precious, and Karl-Anthony Towns on the floor. We've seen Tom Thibodeau employ that lineup a little bit, especially the Precious and Cat. The plus-minus on-off numbers are fantastic. Those are metrics that Tom Thibodeau cares about. So I think having Precious more integrated into the roster, increasing his minutes, increasing his usage and role will help alleviate some of those issues that Karl-Anthony Towns brings as a rim protector.
I think the other piece of this trade, Lee, I think you might agree, that was tough for Knicks fans was Donte DiVincenzo going out after the year that he had in New York. And we talk about an acclimation process. John, I think it's fair to say that's what's happening with Donte up there at the moment. I mean, are you seeing signs that things are coming together or progress is being made with Donte and his role, or how that role might evolve?
Yeah, Ian, that's honestly been the biggest surprise of this whole thing for me. Like, I expected Julius Randle to have his kind of growing pains and the issues early on as he's trying to acclimate, to a very ball dominant type of style of play into this Wolves team. and defensively as well. But I thought Donte Divincenzo was going to be much more seamless integration, plug and play, the way that he shoots, the defense that he plays, his ability. It just hasn't quite clicked in yet. And what we have seen so far is I do think it has been a big adjustment for Donte going from, the second half of the season with the Knicks last year where he was a starter. He's playing 40 minutes a night. He's getting tons of shots. He's really an integral part of that starting five, and then had huge playoff moments. And then he comes to Minnesota, and now he's coming off the bench. He's still playing a lot of minutes, 27 minutes a game or so. But he just isn't shooting like he normally does. And when a player of his shooting caliber is not knocking down shots, I think he's he's 32% this year from three, but even from the corners, it's under 30%, which is just shocking. That just tells me that this is a player still going through the mental hurdles of making that transition. Remember, guys, like this trade happened a couple of days before training camp. For all of the people involved here, there was very little time to prepare. Donte has a young child, and so he has a family, and they're moving and all that. And I think that there's a lot of hecticness that's involved. Over the last week or two, we have seen his playmaking start to lock in a little bit more. He is finding Rudy Gobert for lob passes better than he was early in the season when there were a lot more turnovers. That's been helpful. Now everyone is just waiting for the dam to finally break with his shot, and everyone believes that it will. He's just too good for it not to. But it just tells me that, again, Ian, that he's just really kind of still in the mental phase of transitioning away from that role that he had in New York to this role in Minnesota. And when he becomes a little more comfortable with it, I think that those shots will start to fall, and he'll do what he does.
John, you and I saw how raw the emotions were in that preseason game, Knicks-T-Wolves. We all know what happened with Rick Brunson and Donte, and the emotions were raw then. I'm sure there's still emotions now, and I know Donte just a little bit, getting to know him a little bit from him being here. If I had to bet, I would bet that dam starts to break tomorrow night against the Knicks. I think he'll be fired up to play that game. And then just one note on Julius that I found interesting. We were talking to him when the T-Wolves were in town, and he said he is still going to be involved in the Earl Monroe school that he has put a lot of sweat equity money into over his career as a Knick, and he said he's still going to be involved in that project while in Minnesota. So I thought that was fantastic from Julius. John, I want to just follow up quickly on Donte. My understanding was that Minnesota really, really wanted Donte throughout the whole process with the talks around Karl-Anthony Towns. Was that your understanding as well? And do they still kind of feel that way about Donte?
Yeah, absolutely, and you know this as well as I do, that the Knicks have been trying to engage the Timberwolves and Karl-Anthony Towns trade talks for a very long time prior to the deal actually getting done, and they were always kind of either rebuffed or really never got off the ground in terms of talks. A, because the Timberwolves were not ready to move Cat, but also B, I don't think that there was ever an offer that really enticed the Timberwolves into even engaging in discussions until just before training camp, when the Knicks finally did include Donte Divincenzo in those talks. The Wolves love his skill set. They love what he brings to the table competitively. They also really love his contract on a team that has a lot of big money deals out there. Donte is an incredible bargain when you look at what he's signed for the next several years. I think it's around $11 million a year. It's a very attractive asset. And so, even though things have not gone great here early on in his tenure with Minnesota, he has been told by team officials and everyone that, hey, we're not trading you. You are part of this team. We want you to grow here and build here, and I don't anticipate that changing anytime soon. They really do believe that over the long haul, he can really be a perfect fit for what they want, and everyone is just working here to try and make sure that the learning curve is shortened a little bit, and that he, really kind of gets into a spot where he feels comfortable and can really impact games the way that he did in New York.
And Lee, I'm curious for you, how have you seen this Knick team not make up for Donte's absence, but how have you seen it change in Donte's absence, and who do you see as kind of having filled the void in his role?
Donte thrived in New York because of his ability to play off ball. I think in Minnesota, it's been a little bit of a clunky fit. To me, the role hasn't emerged yet of what he's going to be. I think he prefers to be a starter, obviously. John pointed out that second half of the season, he wasn't just a starter. He was a focal point in the offense. They were running a lot of pin downs and dribble handoffs for him to get open on the perimeter. In Minnesota, he's come off the bench after initially being on ball and kind of playing more of a point guard role, which is not his expertise. I hope that he's able to carve something out off the bench. It's kind of a microwave that comes in, plays the passing lanes, disrupts passes and flow and ability to hit his three-point shot, and also to the rim. His field goal percentage is down all around. So it's all about role for him. But on the Knicks side, it's all about Deuce, man. Deuce McBride has really stepped in, him and Campaign, into that catch and shoot position on the perimeter, but also knocking down mid-range shots as the fourth or fifth bailout option too. Deuce has really thrived in that capacity, as well as Josh Hart playing a lot of that chaos as a fifth starter. So I think Deuce is it's from IQ to Grimes, from Grimes to Donte, and Donte to now Deuce McBride. I think there's definitely a high level of attention on development and roles in this Knicks organization. And Deuce is another player who's on an incredible contract and has stepped in and increased his scoring averages and his percentages, and really is now the most important bench player for this Knicks team as a sixth man.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that bench evolves over the course of this season. Obviously, plenty of basketball to be.
On the road, just like on the court, you need speed and precision. And the first ever Kia K4 delivers both, with an available 190 horsepower turbocharged engine and sleek futuristic design. The Kia K4 stands out with star map LED headlights and available surround view monitor, offering a courtside view of all the action. Plus, Sirius XM comes standard, bringing you closer to what you love. Learn more at kia.com/K4. Surround view monitor may not detect all objects around the vehicle.
Played. Now we were moving on to what we learned, which is presented by Binghamton University. Binghamton University was named the top school in the SUNY system according to recent rankings from the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. Visit binghamton.edu for more. One item here in the What We Learned section is Landry Shamet getting back on the floor. Played for the Westchester Knicks a few nights ago. Plan is for him to go down with the team to play in that Orlando G League showcase later this week. So he's back on the floor. Knicks obviously keeping an eye on him. They waived him in the preseason because he wasn't going to be ready for a long time in the regular season because of that dislocated right shoulder. But he rehabbed with the G League club. So Knicks keeping an eye there. They can add him if they want to. They would just have to waive somebody to create the space under that second apron. So something to keep an eye on there. Well, a couple other trade notes just around the league. John, one that might be relevant to your team in the West. I'm told that the Lakers, among the players on their radar for potential trades, it includes Colin Sexton and Walker Kessler in Utah. I would expect the Jazz to get a lot of calls on Kessler, some calls on Sexton. Lakers obviously needed to do something there to get things going. Season hasn't been what they've wanted it to be so far. So interesting to see what they will do or won't do at the deadline. We also noted that Denver, your group, John, The Athletic, reported Denver looking for some scoring help. And Brandon Ingram is one name that had been on their radar as they pursue that help. And if you look at their contracts, their salaries on the roster, Michael Porter Jr. is the clearest way for them to get one of those big salary, big name scorers. So just something to keep an eye on there with Denver as we move forward. But now we're going to take a look back, John and Lee, and we're going to look back at Zach Buckley of Bleacher Report, who really nailed the Knicks' future plans when he wrote an article in May of 2023 naming 3 realistic trades the Knicks could make. Those trades were for OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and Karl-Anthony Towns. So credit to Zach Buckley for really hitting it on the head there back in May of 2023. And John, you mentioned the idea that the Knicks had engaged Minnesota pretty regularly on Karl Towns, and certainly well ahead of this past offseason. I had heard different things the previous offseason where if the Knicks put the right offer on the table, They thought that they might be able to get Karl. Obviously, nothing happened, but this has been something that had been at least on their radar for, I think, since Leon Rose came in the door, honestly, because Karl-Anthony Towns Sr., Karl's dad, I remember he was at the game where Leon Rose was first introduced as president, his first home game as Knick president. So the ties there are very strong. And so it's been something that's kind of been out there in the ether. What was your understanding about this thing leading up to this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, certainly as soon as Leon did take over in New York, there was immediate speculation. Folks in Minnesota are used to Knicks media, maybe Knicks fans saying every Timberwolves player is going to New York. Why wouldn't they want to leave Minnesota and go to New York? To Karl's credit, he always professed love for Minnesota. I think he was shocked when the trade actually did go down. But yes, I think Ian, big picture, I think that there were multiple sort of engagements over the years. I think prior to this last year or so, it was more kind of dipping the toe in the water. I don't think the Timberwolves were ever really close to wanting to trade Karl-Anthony Towns. And so, if you want to dance, you got to find a willing dance partner. And even as much as the Knicks may have wanted to get Karl-Anthony Towns in the past, the Wolves just were never going to engage. The other thing that I kept hearing about was, you wondered if, hey, are the Knicks actually going to, over the previous couple of years, are they going to target Joel Embiid? Is it going to be Giannis? Right. Is it going to be other big name players? And I think some of those options were taken off of the board over the last couple of years with contracts, with Giannis winning a title, all of these other things. And that also kind of allowed the Knicks to really even solidify even more around Karl-Anthony Towns as a viable option. Certainly with Mitchell Robinson's injury as well, that increased the intensity or the urgency for the Knicks to try and get a real option at center going into this season. And really the Timberwolves always just kind of sat back and said, if you're really serious about having a Karl-Anthony Towns conversation, come to us with the real offer. And in from my estimation, what I had heard over the last 3-4 years, the Knicks never really brought a real offer to them that they felt worth considering until, September of this year, where they really started to ramp it up and put Donte Divincenzo in the mix, put the draft pick into the mix. And that, coupled with the Wolves salary cap situation and the new collective bargaining agreement and all of the things that factored in, at least opened the door more than it ever had been, and they were able to hammer out a deal.
Yeah, I'll just to add to that, I do think, Jalen Brunson's ascension as a player and the idea that, people in the organization, decision makers, felt that, Karl Towns would be such a good fit with Jalen Brunson offensively. And so I do think that was another element that really pushed the Knicks towards Karl, in addition to everything that John said. And Lee, for you, obviously we asked you your thoughts on the trade, but just out of curiosity, is there, when Leon Rose took over, or over the course of his tenure, when you talked about those bigger names that John mentioned, where did Cat rank on your list when you're talking about a Giannis and Embiid and others? Was he at the top of your list? And I ask that because it's just funny how sometimes things work out, and in the end, maybe it's the guy who Knicks fans weren't in love with the idea of trading that really ends up being a good fit.
I was an advocate for him, but he wasn't high on my personal list. But I did think, because of the ties to CAA and Leon Rose being his agent, for Karl-Anthony Towns when he was with CAA, I thought that he was always viable, as well as Embiid and the other guys that Leon Rose was managing. But to me, Leon Rose has been masterful at his job because he knows when to sell high. And not just that, he has firsthand experience of how James Dolan Knicks have operated in the past, and he's done the exact opposite since taking over. He was the agent for Eddie Curry, Andre Bargnani, Carmelo Anthony. He's seen Dolan time and time again push all the chips to the middle on a player who's either past their prime or not a good fit on or off the court. Karl-Anthony Towns checks all the boxes. Tom Thibodeau was his first coach and really leaned into him to become a better defender and a better rebounder. Karl-Anthony Towns put his best stats under Tom Thibodeau. Gerson Rosas was a GM for Minnesota and was the one that really scouted him and drafted him. And now he's in a part of a Knicks front office. And then I mentioned the Leon Rose's agent, relationship with Karl-Anthony Towns. So it made sense. Whether he was atop my list or not, to me, is inconsequential because Leon Rose knows better than I, and Leon Rose really understands fit, I think, better than the fan ever does, because he knows his players and who they are in terms of their character and what kind of human beings they are. And he's really galvanized a group around Brunson that fits as teammates and everyone understanding their role.
You bring up a great point about Leon Rose knowing the inner workings of the Knicks just from being an agent, several clients on the team. Something I think about a lot. And I think the idea that he learned about what was working there, what wasn't working there, learned a lot about what was going on under the hood in his role as an agent. I think that really informed him as team president. Right now, we're going to move ahead to our quick injury update section of the show, and the injury update right now is what it always is. Mitchell Robinson, he mentioned on TikTok Live that he was running on a treadmill today, and that was a couple of days ago. That was Let's Talk Knicks, dug that one up, so credit to them. And the idea that he's running on a treadmill is a positive. It tells you that progress is being made. The big hurdle, obviously, would be sprinting, and then getting cleared to practice, taking contact. And the idea we haven't been there tells you we're still weeks away from seeing Mitchell Robinson back on the floor in a game. So it's just interesting for the Knicks, because they have to determine if and when Robinson can come back, and is he going to be able to perform at the level where they're going to need him to perform. And if they determine the answer is no, how do you approach the trade deadline? So a lot of moving parts there for the Knicks with regards to Mitchell Robinson's injury, but steady progress. And now we are going to hit the talkback section of the program where we take questions from you guys out there who are watching the show and interacting with us. And we're going to start with my buddy Jay from East New York on YouTube. He wants to know, shout out to the panel. Well, first of all, he says, "Hey fellas, shout out to the panel." Thank you, Jay. He wants to know who's the X factor, for the Knicks against the T-Wolves. John, I'll go to you with the Minnesota. Who is the X factor for your club?
Yeah, it's going to be for the Timberwolves. I think Jaden McDaniels has played really, really well of late, especially offensively, picking up his rebounding. He's gotten back to that all-defensive player that he was last year, and is really kind of leading the way a little bit. So if he can knock down some shots and grab some rebounds against a very tough and physical Knicks team, that will help them a lot. I think Anthony Edwards will be ready to play against Cad on national TV. Julius will and Donte will have their emotional kind of lift ready. They need Jaden McDaniels kind of locked in and really kind of being a kind of a dominant defensive player against this really great Knicks offensive team, but they also need him to contribute offensively to help them keep up from a shot making standpoint.
Yeah, maybe not an X factor for me, but Mikal Bridges defending Anthony Edwards and getting into the ball, and how the Knicks, if they're able to have success on Edwards, it starts with Bridges. So that's what I'm looking at. And we also have a question here from, Fritz Alcindor Jr. on YouTube. Thank you, Fritz. Fritz wants to know, is the Knicks drop-off in defense a problem that needs to be solved within or by returning or adding personnel? And I want to go to Lee here. Lee, your thoughts on the defense. Can it be solved from within? Do they need to go externally to figure this thing out?
Yeah, that's a great question. Shout out Fritz, part of a KOT family. Love you, brother. I think the reinforcements are coming once Mitchell Robinson is healthy. If there's one trade that I would advocate for the Knicks to make, it would be for someone who can guard the point of attack. It's what we've been missing with Mikal. It seems to have lost a step from his Phoenix days when he was All-NBA first-team defender. I think we need maybe one more guy off the bench. That could be Shamet. It could be Deuce in an increased role. I'm not sure. But to me, the real keys are Mitchell Robinson Jr.'s return and Precious Achiuwa's full reacclimation into the Knicks rotation. To me, his physicality, his ability to switch on defense, his ability to close out on the three-point line, but also protect the rim is crucial. And one of my most controversial takes is never trade Mitch. He has his issues. He is paper man. He gets injured all the time. But I love his heart. I love his rebounding. And you don't need those type of guys when you're guarding the Jokers or the Embiids or the Miles Bridges, those guys who can really dominate in the paint or the mid-range. You need Mitchell Robinson. He showed his importance in that Philadelphia series last playoffs.
Fellas, we are going to close with a question from Sam on YouTube. John, I won't burden you with this one. Lee, I'm curious to hear what you're going to say. Is there a player? Can you give me the name of one player that the Knicks could and should acquire at the deadline?
Instantly, Dorian Finney-Smith. I live here in Dallas. I've watched almost every Mav game in my entire life for almost 20 years. And Dorian Finney-Smith is one of the best Swiss Army knife defenders. He can guard not only the point of attack, he can also front bigs and cut off driving lanes as well. Sits 7, but plays a lot bigger. Can guard 1 through 5, has a 3-point ability, great catch and shoot option. I think we have the swaps, and this would be the only trade I would advocate for Mitch being included. The only one that's realistic, right? Herb Jones is not realistic, but Dorian Finney-Smith is someone who I think we have to pay another Nets tax because we are dealing with Joe Tsai, a mortal enemy to New York Knicks fans. But I really think that Dorian Finney-Smith would solve. I mean, you could put him in the starting lineup and put Josh Hart in the bench, or you could have Dorian Finney-Smith being the sixth man. I love Finney-Smith's game, and he's also a dog. Not a good character, but definitely a dog on the court. And I think Tibbs would really love him.
That's an interesting option. The Nets, they got 3 seconds back for Dennis Schroeder, sent 1 second out. So that's getting 2 seconds back for Dennis Schroeder. I think that tells you where the market might be for them with Dorian Finney-Smith, who would not have the same trade value as a Schroeder. So you think he'd be gettable out there on the market. But we will see how things progress here. And John, Lee, we can't thank you guys enough for your time, for jumping on with us. John, enjoy that game up north tomorrow night. We'll certainly be keeping an eye on your coverage on The Athletic. And Lee, keep giving us your takes. We'll be keeping an eye on you, Twitter, KOT show, everything. So thank you guys for joining us. And our next show here on the Putback is coming Tuesday, January 7th. So happy holidays, happy new year to everybody who's checking us out. Be sure to join us again in the new year.
On the road, just like on the court, you need speed and precision. And the first ever Kia K4 delivers both, with an available 190 horsepower turbocharged engine and sleek futuristic design. The Kia K4 stands out with Star Map LED headlights and available surround view monitor, offering a courtside view of all the action. Plus, Sirius XM comes standard, bringing you closer to what you love. Learn more at kia.com/K4. Surround view monitor may not detect all objects around the vehicle.